So, to me, initiative and referendum is important not just because of issues like the immigration issue you've worked on, not just because of term limits. I worked all over the country on term limits. And there was an issue that if you didn't have the ability to go directly to the voters, forget about it. Legislators were not going to pass it. And the reason we don't have term limits today for the U.S. Congress, even though 83% of the American people in the last poll I saw support term limits and have for decades, is because the folks in Washington representing us do not represent us. And that's why it's so essential that we have a way to represent ourselves. Now, it's funny, it's not as if the people always get it right. I, years ago, was working to try to bring initiative referendum to Minnesota, and I met with a guy who wasn't sure how he felt about initiative referendum, and I said, well, let's have lunch and talk about it. And we go out to lunch, we sit down, 2 seconds later, he shoots out the question, he says, do you trust the people? And I thought, oh my goodness, this sounds like a trick question. And even though I live in the Washington, D.C. area, I figured, what the heck, I'll answer it honestly. And, little joke there. And I said, no. But I trust the people a whole lot more than I trust the politicians.
Yeah.
And the point of that isn't that politicians are terrible and evil, but that you can't trust the politicians or the people are always going to get it right. They don't. If you've read 2 words of history, you know that terrible mistakes can happen. Even in democratic countries, even with a constitution that protects individual rights, we have seen those rights violated. This is the greatest, freest country in the world. And by golly, throughout our history, we have engaged in things that are unspeakable almost. So if it can happen here, and those kind of things can go on, we can never trust that the people voting, or politicians, or commissions, or any elite group, we can't trust that freedom is going to be protected, that our rights are going to be protected.
Right.
But we know that if the people don't appreciate freedom, in my view, there's no hope. If we don't have the people on our side, we're sunk. The politicians are not going to do it for us. The elite are not going to do it for us. When I was working on term limits, I used to oftentimes open up talks by saying, I feel like I'm on the wrong side of an 80-20 issue. I'm with the 80% of Americans who favor term limits. And that's turned out, at least thus far, to be true. The 80% have lost thus far, and the 20% have won. Now, in places like Arkansas, where you have the initiative process, that's different. In fact, in virtually every initiative state, you have term limits for your local officials. But we can't seem to get it in Washington. And the reason is because the voters can't decide directly. We have to have a check where the people can both stop legislation that doesn't serve their interests, and when there are ideas to reform government that we know our elected officials are not going to embrace, that we have the power to do it ourselves. I think this issue that you're engaged in, this initiative campaign, is something that has tremendous public support, and yet without the initiative would not see the light of day.
That's right. That's right.
So it's, but I think it's also important when we look at the initiative. It's easy, if I'm talking to a crowd that likes term limits, and frankly just about every crowd likes term limits, it's easy for them to say, yes, we love the initiative because we love term limits and it's a way to get there. It's easy for you all to say, well, we need immigration reform. And the only way we can get there is through the initiative process. So it's a good process. But I think we also have to say that when the issue being put forward is an issue we adamantly disagree with, Now that's harder. That's a lot harder. If the issues on the table through the initiative process are issues that we really don't like, that we're afraid might pass, and that we think are the wrong ideas for the country, there are times when people say, well, we just can't have this initiative process. I talk to people around the country. One of the things we try to do is bring people together, right, left, in between, and protect the initiative process. And that means that when there's an issue that I think is a bad idea, a dumb idea, a destructive idea that's being put forth by initiative, doesn't mean I support the idea, but I have to support the right of those people to bring forward that idea and to have it debated. So why? Because if it's not debated, if we try to bottle up ideas that we don't like, we know they're going to bottle up our ideas that they don't like. And if we turn against the wisdom of the people, even knowing I don't trust the people, they can be wrong, we have to recognize that, but if we somehow take it out of the people's hands, then that power goes somewhere. And we know where it goes. It goes into fewer hands. It goes into decisions that are made not at the ballot box, not with debate on television and in the newspapers, but with debate in some back room somewhere, with people making that decision that we don't know who they spoke to last and who promised whom what, and so on and so on.